Hey, what's up, everybody? Hey, AMP here. We did some work to Web Component Factory recently. We put some Docker integration into it that I wanted to test out here. So let's take a look at what kind of Docker stuff we put in. First of all, this repo has a Docker file, and what it's doing is it's building off of the node Docker image. It's installing Yarn globally. It's gathering up, this is a monorepo, so this is a monorepo to build monorepos, so it's a little confusing, but this is sort of the top level of the monorepo. And so this is the package.json of the monorepo. This is the one that doesn't get published anywhere, it just gets pushed up to GitHub. Has its own Yarn lock file. So it's managed with Lerna and Yarn workspaces. Those are actually integrated together to manage that, to manage the monorepo dependencies. And then what we have to do is copy in each one of the package.jsons within our monorepo. So in our case, we only have two right now. We have a CLI, and then we have a Yeoman generator. That the CLI controls that actually scaffolds out this Web Component Factory monorepo. It builds one for you so that you can start a project. And then it also allows you to create new elements for within that monorepo. So it just copies the package.jsons in. Whenever those are all good to go, it then runs the Yarn install process, which again uses Yarn workspaces. So that's going to install everything that all of your, the root of your monorepo, all of its dependencies, as well as all of the packages that are within the monorepo. So it's going to install everything, dedupe everything, put a central node modules folder in the root of your monorepo, and symlink all of your packages together so that you have a single source of truth in case any of your projects depend and any one of your packages, depends on another package that you're working on. So it does all that. And then it copies over the remaining portion of files that it finds in this WC factory. So this is specifically for development. Or just getting the latest copy of the code in WC Factory. What it's also doing is it's putting a temp directory in there, and the reason why it's doing that is because, as you can see, we have an an entry point of WC Factory. So this is the globally installed CLI that, if we look up here, we have Docker actually going into the CLI. That's one of our packages in this repo, and it's running Yarn link, and that's going to make the CLI available globally inside of this Docker container. And so any commands that you run from this Docker container will get executed in the context of this WC factory. So for instance, if you run docker run, so you docker run and then the image name, and whatever arguments you pass after that will be arguments for the WC factory CLI. So we're going to take a look at that and see if all this works. So in addition to running this Docker image with just the Docker command, we've included a Docker compose file in here, which makes it easier for you to work in local development, because what you can do is clone this repo and then run Docker compose build and then Docker compose run WC factory. And that is in essence the same as using the just vanilla Docker run command. Now, what the Docker compose file gives you that is specifically helpful for local development is that we can map volumes. So you won't have to do that manually as you would with the Docker run command. We're going to do that for you inside of the Docker Compose. So whenever you run Docker Compose run WC Factory, it's going to automatically copy over all the files locally. It's going to set up that temp directory, which will be useful. So that is the directory in which all files that are generated based on you running this WC Factory command inside of your Docker container, any files created inside the Docker container will be put into a directory that's in your temp directory. So pretty helpful for local development. And then this is just sort of developing node projects in Docker. We have to create just volumes for node modules because we don't want them being overridden by this command here. So one of the benefits of including a Docker file in your project is that you can easily hook this up to Docker Hub. So if we go over to Docker Hub, under our Elms LN organization, you can see that we have WC Factory, and this is an automated build. So every time we make a change to master or that we do a tagged release, this is going to generate an automatic build of our Docker container. So as you can see here, the last time we pushed was last night, and it's automatically run through that and installed the latest and greatest of everything. So it is a big Docker image, but if you think about what it's doing, it's actually containing all of your dependencies for you. So this saves you, you're going to have to do that process anyway. Docker just does it for you. And that way, everything is completely self-contained. So let's test this out and see if it works here. I am going to come here. Let me just give myself a little bit more room. And we're in the WC Factory. I'm going to make sure I have the latest version of everything. I'm going to pull from upstream. And as you can see, that contains the changes that were added by that Docker pull request. So let's see if this stuff works. So the first thing I'm going to do is run Docker compose build. And again, what I'm illustrating here is what you'd probably do if you're actually working on this project. So you can imagine if you're working, if you have a project similar to WC Factory, this could be for any project. Putting this Docker file in there, putting Docker Compose makes it a lot easier for your contributors to work on this project because you have sort of everything set up. You don't have to worry about having them install certain things. As long as they have Docker and Docker Compose, they should be good to go. All right, so by running Docker build, you can see that it's built out that image from scratch. So just for clarification, this is different than the image that was built on Docker Hub. So we'll cover using the Docker Hub image in a second, but I just wanted to point out that these two images are different. One was built by Docker Hub and one was built locally by you running it on running Docker Compose on your local computer. So if let's open up that code. And as you can see here, we have some, inside of the README, we have some information about setting this up and then some information about Docker. So you can basically skip this if you're using the Docker container for your local development. So it says that we can run Docker Compose WC Factory and then the command that we want. So let's just test it out for right now. Let's run Docker Compose, run WC Factory -H. Nothing. Oh, there we go. Not sure why it took so long there. Let's see if the subsequent calls take that long. But basically, so it spun up that image that we just built, and it so we're specifying here run the WC Factory service, which this service is contained in the Docker file or Docker Compose. And we're just passing in the dash help flag, so it's printing out all of the different options for our CLI. So if, let's say we open this up here, and I'll get rid of this temp directory because apparently that was left over. And this. Okay, so before I delete this, so you can see this node modules folder. Now, you might be wondering how you got that since we said that we didn't want to override the node modules folder, and we didn't install node modules here. If you by setting up these volumes, Docker Compose automatically stubs out the file locally. I'm not entirely sure why. Or if that's possible to prevent that, but just in case you're wondering why you have an empty node modules folder there, that's why. All right, so let's try to init this. Now, I believe that there might be a bug currently, unless that was fixed in between last night and now, with init. So what I'm going to do is just quickly run the init command and then cancel out of any install process that it might be trying to go through. So as you can see over here, we have a temp directory that's set up with a Docker subdirectory and our WC Factory subdirectory that is the service. And look at that, it's asking for a valid repo name. So we're going to say Gotham. And there we go. It's created files again. I'm going to cancel out of that. But as you can see here, it stubbed out all of our files for us. So for development, this is really useful because we can not have to worry about setting anything up, but we can see exactly what files would have been created and just throw it into this disposable temp directory. So pretty useful. Now, what about people that just want to use the tool in general and aren't developing locally on this? So you can use it in a few different ways. One would be to look at how we construct our Docker Compose file and simply make one for yourself. And the other would be to use the Docker run commands. So let's test that out here. So I'm going to back out of this directory and I'm going to do WC Factory test. So I've completely CD'd out of that WC Factory root directory, so I'm outside the context of the Docker Compose. And I want to run this, this instance here. So what I would do, if I can remember the commands, is docker run remove. So --rm will remove the container whenever it's done. We're going to put it into interactive mode, interactive terminal mode. I'm going to map the volume. I'm going to say anything at this. I can never remember the syntax. Everything at this path. So this folder that we're currently at, I want you to sync it with everything inside of, I should really put this in the Docker README. It is everything at this location. So that's the temporary directory inside of the Docker file. So that is where all of the generated files will be going. So we want to map our local folder to that remote folder located inside of our Docker container. And then it's going to ask what image do we want. So we want the Elms Island image that's on Docker Hub. the Elms Inlet organization, and this is WC Factory. Now, I think we might want to tag this with latest just to make sure that we're getting the latest copy of everything. Let's test it out. Not sure if it's going to work, but help. Invalid reference format. It's probably that path. Let's try to remove the path real quick to see if that's the problem. Nope, that's not it. Well, at least we know that. Docker run. Okay, so that was, we know that that did work. It's probably latest. At latest? Hashtag latest? No. Let's find out. Docker run image latest. Colon. Okay, so maybe that was it. I'm going to see if this is actually the most recent version. I'm not sure if it is. No. So even though that was tagged with the latest version, we know that there is still one left to go. So this actually speaks to, in Docker, why it's better to tag these, because if you're on a tagged release, then you know that exactly which one you're getting. But what we can do is just delete the image for now and repull it. So Docker remove image. Let's see our Docker images. Elms WC Factory. Let's get the ID for it, because now we can just say Docker RMI that. Okay, so it deleted that cache. So let's try our Docker run again with a volume. All right, and since I obviously since I deleted that image, it's going to go out to Docker Hub and repull down the image for us. Now, again, as I mentioned, this is like 300 megs, so it might take a little bit, but it's going to be a wash anyway, because you would have to, if you didn't have the Docker container, what you'd have to do is just keep running yarn install every time you pulled down changes. So it's I think it's probably a wash either way. All right, so that's finished. Now we will run let's see. Did that do anything? No, it didn't do anything. So let's feed it a command. Let's say init. So there we go. So we can see that's working. So we'll call this Gotham. And it's creating it, and it's running through install. I'm going to cancel out of install and do an LSLA, and as you can see, all my files are here. So so basically what we just did was we saw two ways that you can use this Docker file. You can use it for local development, as we saw with the Docker Compose file, Or you can just have your users use it with just pulling down the image directly. Now, again, they can choose to either use Docker run command, or maybe you can put out sort of a starter Docker compose file, maybe a suggested one. And that actually might be the next thing we put into our CLI. Ooh. So yeah, that's Docker for you.